What's up, everybody? How's it going, world? My name's Carpo, and I'm going to talk to you about serotonin, neurotransmitters, dopamine, and a lot of misconceptions about them. And you may say, here's a guy in a funky-ass jacket sitting there in his back office. What the hell does he know about neurotransmitters? You know, my disclaimer would be that I'm just a person who loves to research, and I take a lot of notes. And today I decided I'm going to take notes on this subject and make a video about it. Usually it's inspired by something that happened to me during the day. And today is no different. It was somebody who emailed me, and as a lot of you know, I'm a kratom vendor and herb vendor, and I have Mucuna pruriens usually on the website. And that is a bean from for some reason I thought it was from South America. I guess it's from India, which is about 5% L-Dopa, naturally. L-Dopa is a precursor to dopamine, so if people take it when they think they are dopamine deficient. The stuff I had was standardized, so it has extract added back into it to make it 25% L-Dopa. Now, I took it over a period of time. I've had a lot of questions about it lately because I have a few videos about it on YouTube. And I always tell people the same thing, you know, just because you feel unmotivated or depressed or tired or lethargic does not mean you need dopamine or that you need a motivational boost from L-Dopa. And I'm learning the best I can about it, but there's so much misinformation and such a lack of information that it's really hard to provide an honest viewpoint. But that's what I'm saying. Just this guy sitting here in his office actually can only refer to the information that I have, right? So first off, the reason why I made this, because somebody sent me a message saying that they wanted Mucuna because they had a lab test and it said that they were like 46 on dopamine, whatever the measurement is, maybe nanograms, I don't know. Micrograms, liters, microliters. And he said it was 46, I think, and that the average was supposed to be like 130 to 150 or something, for example. And I said, well, whoa, this caught me off guard. How do you know that, you know, these levels are correct? I mean, this is a hard thing to measure. So he sent me the link to a website. So I checked it out, and it said that basically you send in your urine. I think that they do it through a filter, and then you dry it and you send it in and whatnot. But they test your levels, and then they send you a chart and whatnot and tell you what you might need. I found this kind of disturbing because everything that I've learned completely contradicts that. That first off, you know, like a lot of these things, a lot of people say, and I've read this on a couple websites, like, and on that one too, 86% of people are deficient in some sort of neurotransmitter. Whoops. So I asked myself, exactly what is deficient? What does that mean? If that many of us are deficient, how do we know we're measuring it correctly? There is one thing to remember about neurotransmitters. When you're talking about neurology, you're talking about the brain. Well, 90%, more than 90% of our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. Dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine. And then we have the blood-brain barrier. And then we have separate neurotransmitters in the brain. So when you're sending in your urine to have it tested, they're testing what's in your urine. Now, you can find, like, serotonin can be found in, like, bananas and nuts, nut butters, things like that. So it can throw off the test. But more than that, you're not testing your brain issues, you're testing your gut. And different bacteria in our gut produce this. And a lot of people, that catches them off guard. They don't realize that it's actually our gut bacteria, not even our natural cells, that produce serotonin for us in our gut. How does our body utilize it? Many different ways. But serotonin is also thought of as the feel-good chemical, and that's completely bullshit. There's an important thing that I learned about depression. And this is, I'm going to read these different, you know, things that I have here. I have a couple notes here, and then I have a few web pages open I want to read. But it's hard for me. I don't have hours to organize the notes and edit and everything, so I try to put it as organized for you as I can. For example, we're told Zoloft, you know, came out a long time ago. It's complete BS, of course. The idea that Zoloft is any better than placebo is difficult to justify. But now a new article came out that said it's not low serotonin that causes depression, but it's high serotonin. And that when you tell people to take antidepressants for, say, a few weeks, it'll take effect. To me, that's complete bullshit. What we're learning is that the body actually adapts to that. And the withdrawal from stopping antidepressants quickly is not from you going back to being depressed. It's really from the drug itself. Not taking it in the first place can be a better solution. I'm not sitting here lightly just saying don't take antidepressants. But I feel strongly that antidepressants are more damaging than good because they're not understood. And I'll read more to give you my example. Your body adjusts naturally over time to them and overcompensates for the fact that, oh God, this drug is doing this. Your body can produce whatever it needs at the right time, and it's an amazing thing. So if you feel deficient in something, it may be from a lack of food, improper diet, exercise, whatnot, but likely you don't need a pill. And I really want to see less people taking antidepressants. Pharma doesn't like that idea, but I'm not saying that it doesn't help some people. Okay, but it does. Now, if drugs were that simple to where they just worked, if it was as simple as if pharma understood how these things work, if serotonin deficiency was really the issue, then tell me why they'll have a person take a drug for a month, it doesn't work, have them take another one, and another one. They'll end up having them take 10 different drugs. It might take a person, they'll say, oh, it took me a year to find the right antidepressant. And you're like, well, perhaps that year resolved your depression. We all go through phases, and we have to embrace the phases we go through. And it doesn't mean that we can't have help along the way. I mean, I know what it's like to have extreme stress, and anxiolytics have helped me through that. Sometimes benzodiazepines like Valium, Klonopin, Xanax, they're wonderful when you're really stressed out and truly in need of something to help you. But overdoing it, abusing it. So the other part of what I'm going to talk about is psilocybin, but I'm going to get to that. I have 5 pages open here, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it because it's the best way for me to relay the information without going on for too long in this video. This one's from The Verge. The article says, dopamine is one of the most hyped brain chemicals, supposedly linked from everything to sex to gambling. It's common to read, as Business Insider claimed last week, that dopamine is the pleasure chemical, but that's not true, and the idea was overturned long ago. I have friends who have dopamine tattoos because they think it means pleasure, says Arif Hamid, a Gray Fellow at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and postdoctoral researcher at Brown University, who studies the role of dopamine in the brain. The truth is, dopamine might make you pursue something, but that doesn't mean it's responsible for the pleasure itself. Business Insider, for example, claims that dopamine regulates pleasure, but that's not the case. It might encourage us to keep checking our phones, as Business Insider says, but it's not necessarily responsible for feelings of joy when we get a new notification. This myth is popular and long-lived, but it's time all of us got our terms straight. We spoke to Hamid about the origins of pleasure chemical myth and how it was overturned and what dopamine does. And so I don't want to read into the details. I guess that really makes the point that I need to make, and I'll move on to the next article. Getting the basics, making it simple is what's important, and we need to know: am I taking something that maybe not what it seems or isn't worth what it is? But we'll get to that. The next one is from ScienceDaily.com. It's an article that says, the widely held belief that depression is due to low levels of serotonin in the brain and that effective treatments raise these levels is a myth, argues a leading psychiatrist in the BMJ. David Healy, professor of psychiatry at the Hergus Psychiatric Unit in North Wales, points to a misconception that lowered serotonin levels in depression are an established fact, which he describes as the marketing of a myth. The serotonin reuptake inhibiting SSRI group of drugs came on steam in the late 1980s, nearly 2 decades after first being mooted, writes Healy. The delays centered on finding an indication. After concerns emerged about tranquilizer dependence in the 80s, drug companies marketed SSRIs for depression. even though they were weaker than old tricyclic antidepressants, and sold the idea that depression was the deeper illness behind the superficial manifestations of anxiety, he explains. The approach was an astonishing success, central to which was the notion that SSRIs restored serotonin levels to a normal, a notion that later transmuted into the idea that they remedied a chemical imbalance. And for those of you not aware, the chemical imbalance idea is a complete myth as well. It's really just not an explanation, but rather a symptom. Something's wrong, we need to figure it out, but as for just balancing it out, you can't just add chemicals. It doesn't work that way. So, goes on to say, in the 1990s, no one knew if SSRIs raised or lowered serotonin levels, he writes. They still don't know. There was no evidence that treatment corrected anything, he argues. He suggests that the myth co-opted many, including the complementary health market, psychologists, and journals. But above all, the myth co-opted doctors and patients, he says. For doctors, it provided an easy shorthand for communication with patients. For patients, the idea of correcting an abnormality that has a moral force that can be expected to overcome the scruples some might have about taking a tranquilizer, especially when packaged in the appealing form that distress is not a weakness. In other words, it wasn't considered a drug. An imbalance was something you could correct. It wasn't masking your problems, which is often what taking antidepressants can be. And like I said before, I'm not sitting here bashing antidepressants, but just trying to inform you. And then it goes on to talk about how serotonin is not irrelevant, but it's misunderstood and not understood well here. So I'll go on to the next one, which is Kelly B. Rogan, MD. It's an article that just says the National Institute of Mental Health had this to say. Despite high expectations, neither genomics nor imaging has yet impacted the diagnosis or treatment of the 45 million Americans with serious to moderate mental illness each year. To understand what imbalance is, we must know what balance looks like, and neuroscience to date has not characterized the optimal brain state, nor how to even assess for it. In a review of serotonin theories of depression, Andrews turns the paradigm on its head to conclude, we propose that depressed states are high serotonin phenomena, which challenges the prominent role that low serotonin hypothesis continues to have in depression research. We also propose that the direct serotonin-enhancing effects of antidepressants disturb energy, homeostasis, and worsen symptoms. We argue that symptom reduction, which only occurs over chronic treatment, is attributable to the compensatory responses of the brain attempting to restore energy homeostasis. That's a mouthful, and I hate complicated, cumbersome language. What that basically means is that it's not the reason why the drug works after a period of time is because your brain is trying to overcompensate for the drug being in it, like I said earlier. So it compensates and does what it can. The brain is amazing. It can cure a lot of things. I've had anxiety, I've had depression, I've had pain, I've had loss and anger and frustration. I've had all the things that so many people have had, and I understand how it feels to be like, what's wrong with me? And I even made a video the other day, like, what's wrong with me? But it was more of a obligatory one to help other people understand that you're not alone, that everybody's different. We all have issues, but when your brain is off, it may be manifested by yourself. Sometimes it's just a change of heart. I mean, I felt great today because after getting my teeth fixed yesterday, of course that was a boost. Every time I do something that I need to get done, I get a boost. And so that's why following your passions is so important too. So anyhow, on to the next one. This one is bebrainfit.com. And I don't know how accurate these are, but I just found this, and it was a list of the different neurotransmitters, like 4 of the main ones, and if you're deficient in one, what conditions show. I'm not actually going to do this. I think I'm actually going to post this one in the comment section or wherever in the description, maybe, so you can read it yourself if you want, because I don't know how accurate it is, but it's about, if you feel stressed or not as sharp, or you feel kind of dull. It could be acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, or we could have, there's 30 different neurotransmitters, but we don't understand how they all work, and we're all in our infancy on figuring this out. So I won't even read that one because it's not worth it, and this video is getting long. The last one I'd like to read is the most important one, perhaps to me, which is about psilocybin. And psilocybin, or psychedelic mushroom juice, not juice, but it's the compound which gets you high in psychedelic mushrooms, and it is very similar in structure to serotonin. So it's a key that fits a lock it shouldn't fit. My belief is that it's meant to fit that lock, to give us a glimpse of the other world, if you will, but I'm just going to go ahead and read this part. It says, we might have assumed that the psilocybin experience, the visions, mystical states, the profound emotional experiences, would correlate with a veritable light show of brain activity. But the fMRI scans at Imperial College are showing something different. The most pronounced finding is actually a decrease in activity, meaning decreased blood flow and oxygen consumption, within a particularly important and still mysterious system in the brain known as the default mode network. The default mode network has been a focus of much discussion in neuroscience for over a decade. The network is basically a hub of brain activity that connects our executive functioning in the brain's outer cortex with more primitive emotional and memory-based functioning, residing in deeper and older structures such as the limbic system and the hippocampus. Brain images have shown that the default mode network is activated when an individual's consciousness is engaged in self-referential activity, the inner chatter, the mental flights into past or the future, which often overrun the moment. The network seems to integrate information from different regions in the brain, weaving together an inner narrative and with it a kind of self-concept. Many investigators are associating the default mode network with the ego, or the sense of self. But when the brain is under the influence of psilocybin, the network nearly shuts off. According to Carhart-Harris, the effect is like removing the brain's orchestra conductor, or corporate executive, or capital city. Psilocybin causes the brain to operate without a central hub, without an ego base to hold the system together. In the absence of centralized control, other brain regions are let off the leash, says Carhart-Harris. With lowered ego functioning, unconscious or suppressed contents might rise into awareness. Deep emotions and novel thoughts become accessible. So true. Experiential oddities pop up because brain regions that generally don't communicate are suddenly striking up conversations. At higher doses, the boundaries of self and world come undone, resulting in mystical experiences. The unaltered conscious mind, for evolutionary reasons, reduces waking experience to a manageable current. Under the influence of psilocybin, the mind is freed from top-down default mode constraints. Consciousness essentially opens up. As such, many investigators and healers are seeing potential therapeutic value in psilocybin to treat the individuals who struggle with rigid and overbearing mental processes. When the default mode network, the proposed neural correlate of the ego, becomes ordered and fixed in its patterns, a variety of problems can manifest. States of depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, addictions, and a number of personality disorders all represent rigid and repetitive mental processing, bound up in an overactive default mode network. Using psilocybin, we can temporarily deactivate the network and disrupt stereotyped patterns of functioning, while potentially reintroducing a kind of plasticity which is essential to mental health. Depression and addictions rest on reinforced patterns of brain activity, and a psychedelic will introduce a relative chaos, says Carhart-Harris to The Independent, a UK magazine. Patterns that have become reinforced disintegrate under the drug. A window of opportunity opens in which connections can either be broken or reinforced. New things can be learned at the same time as old things can be unlearnt. It induces a kind of suppleness of mind. Nutt believes that several mental illnesses, such as OCD and depression, are associated with excessive default mode connectivity in the brain. By disrupting this network with psilocybin, we may be able to alleviate these kinds of symptoms in short order. We've never had drugs before with an instant effect. This could create a paradigm shift to help people into a different state of thinking they can then stay in, said Nutt to CNN. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed that. My input on this is, of course, neurotransmitters, all these different drugs, big pharma. I'm sure that there are people out there who find, many useful antidepressants and anxiolytics, which is anti-anxiety meds, benzos and such. All I want to say is that I use a variety of natural herbs. I find kratom to be the best antidepressant for me personally, but I don't think of it as an antidepressant. It just happens to make me feel better. And I'm trying just to feel normal in my normal default mode, of course, all the time. But I have no desire to take a pill for the rest of my life that is supposed to make me feel good. I've heard enough stories to know better. And I would like to say that if anybody out there is struggling, that last part about psilocybin, it can basically give you, in my experience, I should say some people have found that there are antidepressant effects for up to 3 months afterwards. I believe it was Johns Hopkins University did research on it, and you can look it up for yourself and check it out. It can really give a person a perspective on life and death and allow them to understand who they are on a different level and embrace the fact that, we really are all one and all separate, and it's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to laugh and cry. It's okay to be human. And that we will have ups and downs. And this is why the idea of sending in your urine to have it tested for, dopamine is ridiculous. Throughout the day, your dopamine levels are changing. Your body takes L-Dopa and makes dopamine when you need it. We don't even understand how these systems work. So that's the other note. Be cautious. Don't send in your urine to someone and expect them to be able to tell you what you need to take or what low or high levels you have, especially when we don't understand how they work. So, hope you learned something. And if you did, go ahead and leave a comment down there in the comment section. And I guess hit the subscribe button. And if you're interested in contributing to the channel, I have a Patreon account in the description. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And take care now. And don't take drugs just because you have to. Test them and make sure you know they